if you're spending 3, 4, 5 hours, days, weeks mixing your music, you're spending too long on it, and honestly it might be holding your music back. So in today's video I want to share 3 tips to mix faster. Welcome back to the band guide. I'm your band guy, Colin. Now, you might be thinking, why would I want to mix faster? I enjoy the process. Or maybe you're thinking, I really would love to mix faster, but can I still get a good mix? And I want to start off by saying, I actually think you can get a better mix by mixing faster. And that's because when you mix faster, you spend less time overthinking your decisions and more time focusing on the creativity of your decisions. But in order to do this, we kind of have to think through a handful of things to really get there. And that's what I want to give you tips on in today's video. Starting with tip number 1, which is that you should follow a process. You don't just want to move around in the dark and hope to stumble into a good mix. You want to have a clear system, a path that is going to guide you towards getting a good mix. And that path should focus primarily on the fundamentals, which are volume, EQ, compression, reverb, and delay, maybe some basic automation, but that's really it. And then it should also focus on simplifying those tools and using those in a more simple way as opposed to complicating them or making them really advanced sounding. You really want to simplify your process so that you can work quicker, but also that you can be more comfortable in the decisions that you're making. And if you don't already have it, be sure to grab my 6-step checklist to a pro mix. This is a guide that just goes through the 6 steps that all professional mixes have and how you can do them wherever it is that you're making music. It's completely free. It's already helped out thousands of people, so be sure to pick it up for free from the link in the description below. And that is a good starting point, but you can also get a little bit more specific than even that guide is going to give you. So get that guide, and once you have that guide, use that as your broad roadmap, and then try to narrow down more specifically for your music. And if you want help with that, I actually have a live training that I'm doing next Sunday, but you could also get replay access to it if you're watching this later. That's going to be on my backwards mixing blueprint. This is not a free training. This isn't a free guide. This is a paid training for people who are serious about speeding up the process. And if you're interested in that, there's a link below the free guide in the description below. And I'm capping this initial group at 100, but if you're watching this in the future, you might be able to get replay access to that as well. Okay, tip number 2 is that you want to create a roadmap, a very specific process for the song that you're working on that's going to take you from where it is currently sounding to where you want it to sound. A lot of times, if you're anything like me 5 years ago, maybe even 2 or 3 years ago, you might just start mixing without really thinking about where is my song currently and where do I want it to be. So what obstacles am I having? For example, a lot of times with amateur mixes or even professional mixes, initially before they're mixed, or recordings I should say, before they're mixed, they're a little bit dull, they're a little bit muddy, they don't sound as clear and defined, there's not good separation between instruments, and it just doesn't have clarity and impact like you want. So you should figure out if that is what is facing your mix. Figure out those things, and then you want to figure out what exactly you want it to sound like on the other side. So I want it to have clarity. I want it to have a big full low end. Maybe you don't want it to have big full low end, but you might be mixing a big full low end for a song. You don't want to have big full low end just because that's the way you mix. So you want to have clarity around those pieces of your mix. So I'd encourage you to focus, first of all, the tone of the overall song and what individual components are contributing to that tone. So for example, a lot of times our songs sound muddy, but it's not necessarily everything in the song that's making it sound muddy. It might only be 1 or 2 things. So, for example, the biggest culprits that I tend to find are bass guitar. There tends to just be too much between 100 and 300 hertz. And if I just dip that down on EQ, all of a sudden my mix sounds much cleaner and fuller and clearer. And the second is guitars, rhythm guitars, any sort of guitars that have any bigness to them, fullness, a little bit again in that 100 to 300 range, maybe even up to 500 depending on the recordings, can really help clean up your mix, and all of a sudden you get a much cleaner sounding mix. So that's the first area that I focus on. The second area is going to be in the presence, kind of brightening up in the 2K to 5K range. That range is where you're going to really help bring things out and help them pop out in the mix. And then the last thing you really want to get right is the low end, making sure that it sounds the way that's appropriate for your roadmap. You want to have a clear start and a clear destination, and if that destination includes big low end, then you want to get down into that low end area, anything 100 hertz and below on an EQ, and do some tasteful boosting down there on your sources that have it. That's typically going to be bass guitar, kick drum, things like that. Okay, so start there and try to create a defined roadmap from where you currently are to what you want, focusing just on those primary areas. Okay, and tip number 3, set a timer. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if you're hearing that and thinking, nah, I'm not going to do that, but seriously, hear me out here. You want to set a timer. You want to be clear on how much time you're spending as you're going into this process. And you don't need to be rushed by this, but you want to be clear about how much time you're allotting to things if you want to mix faster. If you don't want to spend 5 hours on your mix, then start setting some parameters for yourself. There's this idea of Parkinson's law, and Parkinson's law says something to the effect of our work is going to fill the time that we give it. So if we don't set a timer, we don't set any sort of time limit, how much time do you think we're going to spend on it? That's how you end up spending a month on a mix as opposed to an hour on a mix, which is very possible and very doable. And there's pros doing it and making amazing sounding music every single day. So you want to actually contain your time, constrain your time with a timer. Okay, so those are 3 tips to help you mix faster. We want to follow a process that is going to guide us, create a path for us forward. We want to create a specific roadmap for the song that we're working on so we know where we are currently and the destination we're going to, literally like a roadmap. You need to know both points. And then third, you want to set a timer or timers to help you guide you along the way so that you can finish and not just spend forever doing it. Again, your time is going to expand to the amount that you give it. So if you don't set any sort of constraints on it, you're just going to keep ticking away at it forever. So try a timer. I promise it's going to help you out. You'd be amazed at just setting a timer, what it can do for you. Okay, before you go, be sure to grab the 6-step checklist to a pro mix from the link in the description below. And if you want to go through this process, all of these tips, but much, much more, join the Backwards Mixing Blueprint. There's a link below the free guide that will take you straight to it. I'd really love to have you in it because I think it's something that everybody needs. So I've made it my most affordable training to date, and I think it's something that could really help you out. So if this video was helpful, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next week with another video.
One thing at a time.